Hello, everyone. Hope you are doing well, and welcome to another reading comprehension based passage. And here we find out the direction for question is what? Uh, Answer the following questions based on the information given below. So, before we jump to the question, let's look at the text. What does the text point out? The text begins with uh, the first paragraph. We have all heard stories of sudden self transformation. So, what the US psychologist William Miller and Janet Baker call quantum change, whether it is the religious conversation of St. Paul on the road to Damascus, the enlightenment of Siddhartha Gautam the Buddha, addicts at rock bottom finding God, or near death experience that give people a new outlook on life. But not all sudden or seemingly sudden changes of outlook and personality are beneficial. So, here it is stated that we have all heard good stories about people um, changing, you can say that completely in a very short time. Psychologist, you can talk about William Miller and Janet Baker call you can say that called quantum change. So from the US call this quantum change. Examples of this includes Saint Paul suddenly become religious on the road to Damascus. So Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, reaching enlightenment, and also stated about people struggling with addiction, finding God when they hit their lowest point, or people who have near, you can say that death experience, right? So, um, however, and then see for life differently. However, not all sudden change or changes in how someone sees life or behaves are always good, isn't it? So, when we talk about self transformation, so what does it mean? It means called as a complete change in person's character or ways of thinking. So, that is called as a change, change in a person's character or ways of thinking. Similar to that, when we talk about what means William Miller and Janet Baker call quantum change. So when we talk about quantum change, it's called a sudden, a sudden and dramatic change in a person's way of thinking or personality. Okay, so at the same time, the author also pointed about um, new outlook on life, but not all sudden or seemingly sudden changes of outlook and personality are benefit. So, personality, the combination of qualities and characteristics that make a person unique. Now, after that, it is also stated one way to approach this puzzle is to first get a handle on the degree of overlap, including considering the prevalence of religious delusions or spiritual themes in psychosis. This is difficult to estimate, but if we take spiritual to mean perceiving, communicating with, and being influenced by forces, example, spirit, that other people are not aware of, then the presence of spirituality in psychosis is high. On the other hand, if we think of spirituality as something loving, not exactly religious, but more secular and slightly abstract, then the overlap between spiritual epiphanies and psychosis is not so obvious. Okay, so that's what the author started with and continue with what now by stating one way to think about this problem is to understand how much spiritual ideas and psychosis overlap. This is difficult to measure, but if we define, you can say that spiritual as seeing, talking to, or being influenced by forces like spirits that other can't see, then spirituality is what? Very common, you can say that in psychosis. However, if we think of spirituality as a feeling of love, that is not necessarily religious, isn't it? So or you can say that more like a general non-religious idea. Then the connection between spiritual experience and psychosis is not as clear or is not so obvious, isn't it? So when we talk about uh, you can say that religious delusion, or you talk about what psychosis. So what are they actually, or epiphanies? So if you say that what uh, psychosis, the meaning of psychosis is called as what? How common, or you can say a mental health condition of a person that affects the way means one thinks, often causing them to what? Lose touch with the reality. So that's what is called as a mental health, mental health, mental health condition, isn't it? Mental health condition. So similar to that, when we talk about spiritual epiphanies, the spiritual epiphanies refer to what? Sudden profound realization or insights related to spirituality, right? Sudden profound realization or insights related to spirituality, isn't it? So after that, it is stated that another approach is to flip things around. How many accounts of sudden religious epiphany and transformation include features of psychosis? Feature of psychosis? Again, this depends partly on how we define psychosis. If we take the diagnostic criteria for psychotic disorder, according to US psychiatry, as outlined in the DSM-5 manual, delusions and hallucination are a defining feature, and it's notable then that delusions or false beliefs of grandiosity, persecution, and impending catastrophes are alluded to in all the aforementioned religious codes as a hallucinatory vision, right? Now, in that case, the authors wanted to say that another way to look at this is to ask how many stories of sudden religious awakening and change have signs of psychosis, isn't it? So this also depends on how we define psychosis according to US psychiatry. So DSM manual, psychotic disorders are mainly identified by as what that called as delusions and hallucinations, right? So delusions is called as you can say false belief, and if you talk about hallucination, it's called as a seeing or hearing that are not actually present there. So it's interesting to note that many religious stories mention feelings of being very important, that called as a grandiosity, uh, being targeted, that's called as a persecution, or fearing a common disaster or impending catastrophe, right? So as well as seeing or hearing hallucinatory visions, isn't it? So that's what we can find out. And here, if you talk about that epiphany, it's called as a sudden realization or insights, often of a spiritual or religious nature. The next paragraph stated that the gray area of overlap is especially striking when we focus on hallucination. If a person sees or hears things that are not there, it's called as a hallucination, or that others can't see or hear, when is that a hallucination, as opposed to a religious or spiritual vision. It depends to some extent on the context, content, and interpretation of the experience, and whether these conform to cultural norms. Now, in that case, the unclear boundary between hallucination and spiritual experience, right, or spiritual experiences is especially noticeable when we look at what um, cases, right, where people see or hear things that are not actually there, or others cannot see or hear. When do we call that a hallucination, and when do we call it a religious or spiritual vision, isn't it? So this depends partly on the situation, what the person sees or hears, how they understand it, and whether it fits with what is generally accepted in their culture, isn't it? So, um, if you talk about this one, so it indicates about the gray area. The gray area is something called as unclear, undefined situation, very difficult to distinguish between different things, right? Now, let's come to the next paragraph. The next paragraph stated here is a major clue to the parallels between sudden psychotic episodes and religious epiphanies. It is the mythical idea, endlessly or continuously repeated and very difficult to shake, that the same struggles that can lead to spiritual breakthrough or heroic deeds also risk destroying an individual or, in other words, triggered mental dysfunction. As Boycian put it, the conclusion follows that certain types of mental disorder and certain types of religious experience are like attempts at reorganization. The difference lies in the outcome where the attempt is successful and some degree of victory is won. It is commonly recognized as a religious experience. Where it is unsuccessful or undeterminate, it is commonly spoken of as insanity. Right. Now, what do we understand in this? This gives us an important hint about the similarity between what sudden psychotic and episode and the religious epiphanies, isn't it? So, or you can say religious awakenings. There is a common idea that repeated often and difficult to change, that the same challenge that can lead to spiritual growth or you can say heroic action can also cause a person to break down mentally, right? As we understood that the Boygen put it, right, or a Boygen explained, the conclusion is that some types of mental disorders and some types of religious experiences are both efforts to reorganize the means mental disorder or called as a uh, mind, isn't it? Uh, the difference is in the result. If the effort succeeds and same level of success is achieved, it is usually seen as a religious experience. If it fails or has an unclear result, it is often seen as an insanity, right? So look at the last paragraph. The last paragraph said that according to this view, the same fundamental underlying psychological process can lead to a sudden change that culminates in either illness or revelation and personal growth, right? So, as Poisson also notes, this implies there must be certain accompanying conditions or factors that lead to one outcome or the other. Understanding more about the human capability for sudden transformation and the contextual factors, right, that potential in different directions is a critical challenge for psychology. So, according to this, the same basic psychological process can cause a what you can say that sudden change, right? That results in either mental illness or a new understanding and personal growth. So, as far as we understood, Boyden notes or points out, this means there must be a certain condition, right, or factors, certain conditions or factors that lead to one outcome or the other. Learning more about how people, right, can suddenly change and the situation that guide this change in different ways is an important challenge for what? Important challenge or critical challenge for psychology, isn't it? Now, um, as far as we have understood the text, let's look at the question. What does it ask? So, the passage that we read here discusses sudden self-transformation termed quantum change, right or not, by a set of psychologists to clarify what. Or you can say the question is asking what the passage says about quantum change, right? A term used by psychologists to describe sudden self-transformation, sudden self-transformation, right? Y- so what we need to do, we need to choose the option that best matches the main idea discussed in the passage. Look at the choices which are given here. So the first choice stated, sudden self-transformation can sometimes be mistaken for psychosis due to overlapping features such as delusions and hallucination. Now this choice suggests that sudden change, right? Sudden change or changes in a person, sudden self transformation or sudden changes in a person, which are seen in both spiritual experiences, uh, like you can say religious awakening and psychosis, right? So, and you can say having similar features, making it difficult to tell them apart. Okay. So, question number two, sorry, choice number two, what does it say? The concept of quantum change is universally recognized in both psychological and spiritual context without ambiguity. Now, this choice says that quantum change is clearly understood, right? So clearly understood by everyone in both psychology and spirituality without any ambiguity or confusion, right? Confusion. Now, third, third option stated the nature of sudden self-transformation is mainly understood through the lens of psychological theory rather than spiritual experiences. This choice implies that sudden self-transformation is mostly explained by psychological theories and not by spiritual experiences. Right? Now, four said sudden self-transformation, while important, is generally considered to be a fact or phenomenon exclusive to religious or spiritual context. So this choice suggests that sudden self-transformation happens only in religious or spiritual situation. Now, out of these four, if you observe the first choice, what does it say? Means the first choice stated that the passage, as for the passage, talks about how sudden transformation, like uh, you can say that religious experiences and psychosis, a mental health condition, can have similar features, can have similar features, right? What kind of a similar features, such as delusion or delusions, which is called as a strongly held false beliefs, and also another one is called as a hallucination, right? Seeing or hearing things that are not there. So this makes it difficult to tell them apart. This idea is actually or accurately captured in option one, right? So in that case, if you look at the first paragraph provides that idea. Now, in that case, we can say means self-transformation term quantum change by a set of psychology to clarify what sudden self-transformation can sometimes be mistaken for psychosis due to overlapping features such as delusions or hallucination. Now, look at the second option. So, whether second option is better than the option one or not. So, the second option stated that the passage does not say, right, that quantum change is universally recognized or called as clearly understood by everyone, right, without any confusion. Instead, it focuses on what, how difficult it is to distinguish between what spiritual context um, and psychosis, isn't it? Which is not appropriate or not correct here, right? So look at the option three, where it is stated the nature of sudden self-transformation is mainly understood through the lens of psychological theory rather than spiritual experiences. The passage does not say that sudden self-transformation is mainly understood through psychological theory. Psychological theory. Psychological theory. It looks at both psychological and spiritual perspective. What? Equally. Right. Equally. So hence you can find out option three is also wrong. Right. So option four, it is stated sudden self-transformation, while important, is generally considered to be a fact exclusive to religious or spiritual context. Now, the passage does not claim that sudden self-transformation is, you can say that limited, right? Limited to what? Limited to religious or spiritual context, right? So it suggests that such transformation can occur in various contexts, various, various contexts, isn't it? Various contexts, not just religious or spiritual ones. So hence we can find out option four is also wrong, right? So here we find out that the correct answer option is option one, because it best reflects the main idea of the passage about the overlapping character, right? Overlapping characters of religious experiences and psychosis. Hence, the answer should be option one. Hope you understood. That's all. Thank you.